Alrighty, happy afternoon, everybody. We're going to try to get ourselves a little afternoon chess in. See what kind of games we can get. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and do our Queen's Pawn game. See what transpires. We will gambit a pawn. And notice he took, so this is a Queen's Gambit Accepted. If he pushes the pawn down, then I can take with the knight. If he doesn't push, I can take with the bishop. Now he has gone for the b6 or the b5 defense. Now there's something that I was going to do here, and I think it is simply undermine. I think that's what I want to do. Now we know that c6 is a trap, right? I think that we know that c6 is a trap. Captures. Captures. We are spying this rook. The only way to defend is with this particular knight. Now, I have not actually played this kind of game for real, so we'll see what happens, what can develop. But either way, I am looking at this rook. If my opponent blocks with, let's say, this knight, I'm going to take the knight. So my opponent blocks with the knight, I take the knight, they block with check. My opponent blocks check with their bishop, which opens up a defense of the rook, and then I just hightail it probably back to here, maybe. So this is another way to defend, but notice it still, unfortunately, drops a piece. Now he is perfectly defending the rook, but I'm going to go ahead and pick this guy up. Just retreating my queen. And now he's defending his pawn. So there we go. I'm going to go ahead and snatch my pawn back. I'm going to go ahead and finish development, and I am going to castle. I do want to make sure that my queen has an escape square, that I don't get trapped. My opponent is defending this, the d5 square, which they need to do. Because if my queen happened to manage to get over here, that would spell bad news. All right, so we're up a piece. We've got some good development going on. I would like to retreat my queen somehow. I'm not exactly sure where. Obviously not on this diagonal anymore. I am going to look at making piece trades wherever I can. So possibly something like this. I have a double attack. Debating on, do I take? Let's see, takes. My opponent captures with the queen. I exchange queens. We've just traded pieces, so I'm happy there. Do I have anything else that I could do? No. Oh, he's got an extra. He's got an extra defender on that knight, so I cannot take there. Okay. Fair enough. Let's see, what else can we get involved in the game now? Probably... Oof, I gotta be careful that I'm not blocking my queen in. I'm thinking now get my bishop involved. So I have a bishop on this diagonal. All right, it is time to start retreating the queen, I think, and then I can shut it down. Yeah, let's retreat the queen just a little bit. I'm only up a piece, so I just want to keep that in mind. I'm only up a piece. this bishop is now defended. The knight is defended. This knight is still wrongly placed, but I'm trying to find a home for it. Maybe we just walk it over here. Actually, that might not be a bad idea. Let's see. So he's trading the... Make sure I'm not opening myself up to any possible tricks here because my queen is still way out here. Do we just take? So my opponent now has to move this knight, which will open up an attack on this pawn, which is fine. All right, so this is an undefended piece. I have another tactic I'm looking at. Take this pawn, comes with an attack on my opponent's queen, and it opens up a square for my my queen as well. I would have loved for my bishop to somehow magically get on this square, but that's not going to happen. So let's try this line. Let's see what happens. If my opponent takes back here, then I've got a piece. So I'm trying this tactic, undefended piece, opening up an attack on it. I'm sacrificing a bishop to possibly take a knight. I'm up material, so I'm looking to trade down anyway. My opponent definitely needs to do something with this particular bishop, right? Definitely needs to do something with it. Unless they happen to have some kind of crazy fork, which they don't. They don't have any secret checks that can happen. I do gotta get my knight involved. Well, my opponent just dropped a queen. And there it goes. All right, so let's take a quick peek at this one. Let me say good game to this guy. This was a good game, well played. So let's take a quick look at this game from the standpoint of Queen's Gambit Accepted. So this is one of the dangers of the Queen's Gambit Accepted. If you take this pawn, be prepared, because there are a couple of options that white can refute with. Typically, it is this e3 pawn, just to defend to add another defender. Get rid of these lines real quick. So they push the e3 pawn. That opens up an attack on this pawn. So we've gambited away a pawn, but we're immediately looking to recover it. There's a couple ways my opponent can deal with this. Number one is to defend this pawn. And there are a couple ways to defend. One is put the bishop here. The knight is unfortunately too slow. This knight can't get there. So yeah, it looks like just putting this bishop here might be the only first round of defense. Or just develop naturally and assume I'm going to pick up this piece. You know, the pawn. My opponent going ahead and defend it. That's fine. Now, like I said, this particular line is one that I've been kind of hoping to try. I haven't actually gotten to play it in a game. I showed it off on one of my videos, but I didn't actually get to play it. So let's try it out here real quick. My opponent is trying to defend this pawn. So I'm going to try to undermine his structure. Now, if he takes, I take, and I'm still up my pawn. We trade, my opponent is still up a pawn. So that is one of the dangers, is he takes, I take back, but notice now this pawn is undefended, so I can, his black pawn is here in front of my rook. So my rook has some options to get involved in the game that way. Just some other things to look at. Also, once, if he tries to push down, I can always push past and capture it this way, or I can always push this way. But either way, this pawn is, if he were to capture, this pawn is a weakness for him that he would then have to try to shore up. Notice I actually have two attackers if he captures. So one of the tricks that happens almost immediately is you can capture back with check. So your opponent is forced to respond, typically with the bishop again. You can just drop your queen back. But that's another option you can look at. But either way, my opponent then goes for this particular moveset. And this particular moveset we know causes problems because when we capture, my opponent has to decide what to do with this pawn. They've pushed this pawn for a reason to defend that square. Now they're going to shift it off of that line. And once they shift it off of that line, this becomes an option. from here, you think, oh, I could do the same thing. I could shift my queen over, right? Not so in this case, because pushing this pawn, going with this move order, if I were to move my queen now, my opponent just has to push this pawn. And now this is no longer a threat, because the knight is there to defend that square. So to do this trick correctly, we have to do the move order that's given to us. And it is to capture here. My opponent has already moved this pawn with a purpose. So if they do nothing, right, let's say they do nothing. Let's pick a different move for them. Yeah, something like this. Oh, actually, let's just do a standard developing move. Something like that, right? Either I can take back the pawn, which is still defending my pawn. Notice this. What if I were to just take here? Yeah, my opponent can capture, or can take there. I move my queen. I'm pinning that knight, but they've got this move. So, you know, there are some move order options. But, oops. My goodness. The point I'm trying to make, which I'm not doing very well, is as soon as my opponent pushes, I'm free to take this pawn. 100% free to take this pawn, and I do. Now, my opponent can either take back and see the fight that they had, or they can ignore taking back and just know that we are now even in pawns, right? I have gambited a pawn, so they took a pawn, then I took a pawn, but I have already an attack on this pawn, which defends my other pawn. So I can now, if they make a standard developing move, which is fine, but I can then take, which shores up my pawns. Now they can't take. So now I'm up a pawn after all that process. So that's the point I'm trying to make, is either once they push this pawn, I can go even and in fact up material. So my early gambit, which they took early on, actually becomes them going down material instead of up material. Now, that's not always the case. There are other ways to play the Queen's Gambit Accepted. In fact, let's go back to right here. Let's look at the engine. Let's look at the database, the move order database. Yeah, a standard move order like an E5, right? Challenging the center, immediately challenging my center. Or Knight F6, a standard developing move. Yes, I get my pawn back, right? But that's it. That's all I've accomplished, as we're now even in material. Shutting off this diagonal so there's no shenanigans that happen there. And now we just continue to move on and develop like a regular game, right? So we're back even in material. So what has, let's say before this move, if we look at before this move, not only are we even, but we're even on development too. So we're even in material, we're even on development. What has white accomplished? Well, white has eliminated, basically white has traded one of their wing pawns for one of black's center pawns. So white feels better about the center, but we only have one piece developed each. We have pawn developed. I have two pawns, but I mean, both of us have basically just strong pawn chains. So you can play, you can accept the gambit. There's nothing inherently wrong about accepting that gambit. Just don't try to defend this pawn this way. Let's see, is there a bishop move? I guess there's not really a bishop move order that goes like this, is there? Yeah, not really. Yeah, not really. That was what I was thinking. But yeah, if I were to play the Queen's Gambit Accepted, I just wouldn't try to defend this pawn. I would just assume that, hey, look, this pawn is a goner. We can try to defend it a little bit, but we have to be really careful because all of a sudden this game could quickly turn. Let's look at the engine real quick. Let me delete these alternative lines. Let's look at the engine. Yeah, so the evaluation is barely changes with that move set, right? We can either continue to develop and give our opponent tempo. We can push our e-pawn and control the center this way. This is one of the lines. Notice the advantage that white has sort of drifts away. This is where the advantage comes back because we can then undermine. So this is, and notice it's not that big of an advantage. It's only a pawn advantage for best possible move order. Well, here's an option. Just push past, right? So what you're sacrificing by letting this pawn go. You're up a pawn, so if you give the pawn back, you can then push a queenside pawn and have a queenside pawn attack this early in the game. And really, notice there's no pawns on either side of that. So white would then have to spend a considerable bit of time just trying to dislodge this pawn, and you have to do it with pieces. Can't do it with just pawns anymore. Have to do it with pieces. So yeah, we get our pawn back, but now this kind of has to become a target, right? Yeah, see, this is still a threat, so white needs to take care of that threat. That's one way to do it. Wow, oh, right. Because my rook is trapped. Look at that. Look how fast the turntables have turned. If you're not careful, right? If white tries to go after this pawn too early, white's losing material significantly. So, okay. So this is an interesting line. Like I said, I haven't gotten to actually play one of these games over the board yet, so I haven't actually gotten to do it. So I was really excited that this one happened. I wasn't planning on it, but man, I'm really happy that it did. So, Queen's Gambit Accepted, and this is, I don't know, this is called the old variation. So this is an old variation. Look at that. And this person happened to fall into my trap. And from there, yeah, you can see the evaluation is shifting to 80%. 16,000 games followed up from this position with the queen to f3 like I did. And of the 16,752 games that were played in the database, 80% of them white flat out won. Not a draw, but 80% flat out won. Only 17% they actually lost the game from there, which means there's still another 3% they drew even. So plus or minus a couple percent for rounding errors, but still an 80% win rate with 16,000 games in the database. That's pretty strong. And I'm happy to say that I carried on the tradition and I got the win. This was a very interesting tactic. I had not considered this particular move order, but again, yeah, the engine just says, what does the engine say from this point? Either just throw away the rook and start looking for development, or throw away the knight. I guess maybe you could go to trap. No, because there's more material to be picked up. Yep. Can't defend at all. Okay. Yep, can't defend at all. Okay. So yeah, my opponent played the bishop move, which unfortunately basically means he loses his bishop right away. He getting the knight out of the way to defend the rook was the correct move from that point of view. You could see the engine clearly states that was a huge correct move. Now the next set, yeah, queen takes is the correct move order there, so I got that right. I could have, so I've got two attackers in this pawn, so I could have taken it either way. I figured I would just continue to develop as normal. Offering a queen trade this early in the game, I wasn't ready to do that. And if we look at the engine says neither of those is better. Go ahead and just develop with tempo. Assume that this is a lost pawn no matter what. All right, I can give you that, engine. I'll give you that. I went ahead and took. Interesting. Yeah, the engine's saying get your queen out of there just in case. I was really trying to figure out if I could get this maneuver in, but my opponent is defending this knight pretty well. So and this way too. So there's really no threats along this diagonal until I dislodge two separate pieces. wonder why the engine wanted me to go this way instead. Oh, I guess maybe to bring me back down this way. Go figure, I don't know. Yeah, and then like I said, I saw a tactic here, but the engine says it does not care about that at all. Wow, that was a huge error on my part for some reason. Why can't I take here? Well, I do have to be careful of this. That much I know. So, what's wrong with just going back? Oh, because I lose a rook at the end of that chain. Okay. Okay, I did not see that. I did not see that. This is the part that I didn't see, because this comes with check, and my opponent's rook sitting there with my queen on top. So that could have got my opponent back in the game pretty quickly, but unfortunately, he missed that. Yeah, alignment issues. My queen there. The only thing in between us would have been this bishop. Interesting. Okay. Well, my opponent missed that. That would have been a chance for them to get back in the game. I missed it as well. So, go figure. And then, yeah, my opponent just dropped a queen. That's all she wrote, unfortunately. So, like I said, there was an opportunity for my opponent to get back in the game because of this mistake. I saw a tactic, but I didn't see down. I didn't see deep enough. Takes. 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 And now my rook is undefended, and this comes with check. Well, what if I just move? All right, let's explore this. Takes, takes, takes. My rook is, oh, right, because either way, I have to either move the king, but he just takes a rook, and his rook is defended. Yep, but what did I say, man? Rooks. Get your rooks connected, friends. Get your rooks connected. Get those rooks connected. Don't goof around like I do. Get that rook connected. This guy should have been out of here a long time ago. Get that knight out of here. Get him out of here. That knight should have been out of there a long time ago. Should have held off on, like, this would have been perfect opportunity. Like, there's no threat on my queen. This would have been perfect opportunity to get the knight the heck out of dodge. And then I don't have to worry about that, because it's not dropping a rook. It's just making an exchange. So, all right. Well, anyway, guys, that was a fun game. Queen's Gambit Accepted. Who knew? All right, guys. Y'all take care.